introduction to the projects that Wellcome has funded on the island of Ireland, and to introduce those projects and to chair this part of the session, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Colleen Thomas, who is our Research, Culture and Engagement Manager, I have to say, in the University College Dublin.
All right, thank you very much, Grace. Good morning, everybody. It's still morning, right? Yes, it's still morning. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and I am delighted to be in the position of inviting the teams who have been awarded funding through Wellcome to share their project details. And we're going to start today with the team from University College Cork. And the person who's going to talk to us is Martin Galvin. It was really interesting for me. I've been working with people for months, sometimes years. I know what they do, but I have no idea what their titles are. So I had to go around and ask everybody what their job titles were. So Martin is the head of Research, Culture, Engagement, and Impact at University College Cork. He's a former inner city teacher and community worker, and has been an expert advisor to the Council of Europe and a co-chair of Living Labs in Higher Education for the European Commission. So, well, Martin, you are very welcome. Let's see if I can pull up your slide. You just advance that way.
Everyone can see that okay? Perfect. Yeah, so many thanks, Colleen, and thanks for the warm introduction. And I'm going to take you through kind of a whistle-stop tour of what we have proposed to do in University College Cork with our Wellcome grant. So our initiative is focusing on engaged and inclusive research culture, and we've titled the initiative ERICA, which is really about mobilising engaged research as a mechanism to catalyse and accelerate deep transformation across our institution. So our idea that we're progressing is that we want to include the voice of excluded external communities in the co-design of actions that will help us lead to an engaged and inclusive research culture. So we're integrating kind of a really novel community-led research scheme, which is the first for Ireland, and learning from some of our British colleagues about that work and bringing it over to the island of Ireland. So a little bit about the background on this. Sorry, it's not going down. Okay, bear with me. It's kind of frozen for a sec. Yeah. So we have a really great team involved, led by our president, Vice President of Research, and Professor Maggie O'Neill, who is somewhere here in the audience as well, and myself, and there's a wider group as well involved. So importantly, though, our external partners. So one of our co-applicants is the Health Research Charities Ireland, CEO Avril Keenan. So we're very keen to involve really strong community partners, the British Science Association, and then also, so there are two major community partners. And the British Science Association have come in to support us in two ways, bringing the expertise of Professor Sarah Chater, who is in UCL, which is also a trustee with the British Science Association, and then Jill and Cleo and Chris, who are experts in the whole area of community-led research, and they've been rolling out a really innovative scheme in the UK. So the background to this is that our proposal is kind of deep consultations with our research community, but also with our external partners. And what we kind of realised was that the kind of power dynamic of higher education is currently including excluding the meaningful inclusion and empowerment of external communities in the research ecosystems. But what we mean by that, quite simply, is that research in many ways has become the endeavour or in the purview of well-heeled communities, so mostly a middle-class practice. And we're quite concerned about that in UCC. So our proposal sets out to address this issue in a transformative manner and really kind of lean into the whole idea of inclusive design of research and practice and been ethical and engaged. So where this kind of came about from was during kind of COVID as well. So our idea is that we've identified kind of a power dynamic in our research culture that places barriers around the meaningful empowerment of excluded external communities. And this is kind of really presenting a challenge to enculturating early career researchers into a healthy research environment. So we're embarking kind of on a change process to shift this, and using kind of a community-led engaged research scheme that we're designing as a mechanism to accelerate deep and lasting transformation across the institution. So at the heart of this is the work we're going to do with the British Science Association, but also with Health Research Charities Ireland and the 40 organisations that are a member of that. And at the core of what we're trying to do is to set up a living lab to explore these issues around research culture, how we can involve our external communities. And at the core of that end is the co-design of the community-led research scheme. And the idea is that we're going to bring kind of community-designed research, I'll talk about in a second, that's actually led by community, and that they work on co-designing kind of the research with researchers, but towards kind of having a public policy impact. So for us, COVID-19 really kind of highlighted significant issues around the lack of inclusion of excluded communities in research that informs public policy. And this raised for us really significant epistemic or knowledge justice concerns. So we want to kind of give, and given like all of the challenges that early career researchers face, we want to particularly support them. So the idea is to kind of help move away from kind of a top-down research culture in many ways to community-led research, and develop a wraparound and support scheme to nurture a more bottom-up and co-productive and participatory culture for our early career researchers. And this really feeds into our strategic plan. So it's a strategic initiative. We have significant goals in our strategic plan that talk about all of this. Particularly around transforming our research culture through the implementation of engaged research, open research, academic integrity, ethical and responsible practice, and also a really, really strong commitment to impact in our strategic plan. So our initiative, the Wellcome initiative, is really positioned strategically within the university. And that's kind of a snapshot of the overall project on kind of one page. And we've been really careful to communicate well, working with a graphic designer to make sure that we're communicating visually as well as verbally well. So our initiative centres around 5 interconnected aims. So one is to co-create institutional research with communities through enabling societal voices in the co-design of actions leading to engaged and inclusive research culture excellence, focus on public policy impact, institutionalised engaged and inclusive research, sharing the learning and setting up a community of practice to ensure that we share the learning well. At the heart of all of this is a living lab, which is an open innovation method for co-creating, testing, validating and accelerating innovations. And using the Living Lab's co-creation process, we're bringing together community members with researchers to pilot and test a new way of funding research that connects excluded communities with researchers for public policy impact. So very much kind of co-designed with community. So at the heart of this are 3 kind of things. So one is a research incubation approach. We're going to provide targeted supports to community groups to enable their strategic engagement in research agenda setting. So essentially outreaching to community to support them to articulate out kind of research need through an open call. And this will be done in partnership with Health Research Charities Ireland and reaching out to their 40 member organisations. Kind of research initiatives proposed by community will be reviewed by an independent panel, and will support this whole process with really kind of high-level communications. In the second stage, development of community-led research initiatives supported by grants and wraparound support. So we're going to grant fund community-derived, community-developed research ideas and research questions, and bring them together with our researchers and wraparound support around all that to really, really support them. Key to this is working with Maggie around kind of using walking methods. So essentially community site visits where the researchers and the community folks are kind of exploring the research questions together in the community in kind of the actual context. So they get a really deep understanding of the context behind the community ideas. And then the third stage, communities and the engaged and the early career researchers are going to receive research partnership creation supports with a dedicated officer who's going to work with them to help broker the relationship and kind of mentor. And then as the kind of research initiatives develop, we're going to organise policy roundtables with policymakers to kind of bring the results of the research into actual policy settings to support knowledge exchange. So other quick bits, and I'll be really quick. We have a community of practice designed around all of this, particularly drawing on Sarah Chater's support from UCL. They've incredible experience there with their network and their policy network in the UK. So kind of learning from that how we bring kind of community-derived research, co-created with our researchers, into kind of policy settings that will all be mentored through a community of practice. Researcher education is really important at the heart of all of this. So we're developing a micro-credential CPD series that will be co-designed and taught with the community folks involved with us. And we're hoping that this will become a requirement for academic promotion for all early career researchers and incoming early career researchers. And then beyond that, we're organising World Cafe events to kind of spread the learning. There'll be a virtual learning hub as well that will include toolkits, learning materials and guidelines, and so forth. As Roz mentioned earlier, evaluation is really, really important here. So we want to kind of really have a strong focus on evaluation, learn from the work, so we can share results inside our university, but also externally as well. So we're commissioning an independent and external form of evaluation, underpinned by a theory of change and logic model approach. And there's an expert advisory group as well that's going to be key to kind of advising the initiative. We'll have an interim results seminar and a final conference, and hopefully all of you will be invited and come and learn from what we've done. So from the outset, we have a strong focus on impact. We want to influence research practice, so broaden participation in research through community-generated research agendas, co-produced evidence for public policy, important commitment to researcher education, so that we can accelerate the skills that our researchers have and their capacity to develop a positive research culture, and then also commitment to research support and infrastructure, so that we've got an engaged and inclusive impact culture in our university at all levels, with bottom-up transformation enabled by societal voices, and then a really strong commitment to impact in the whole area of research policy and assessment, so that we've got community-enabled research, a community-enabled research culture institutional model that's replicable and scalable. So the idea is that through the evaluation we've got learning that others can replicate in their settings and we can scale to other places. And that's our journey map. So when you get the slides, you can kind of trace what we're doing and how we're moving through this whole journey over the next number of years. Thank you. That's it. Questions?
We have approximately 2 minutes. So
okay, so happy to take a quick question.
If anybody has a quick question that they'd like to ask Martin.
Sure.
Yes. Sorry, Jill. I made you jump up unexpectedly.
Hi, Trish William from SCTU. I'm a PhD researcher. And co-design is how I do the research, so I'm really interested in this particular presentation, but I sat too far back and I can't read now. I just wanted to ask how the questions for the research are set. Are they set with the community that will be involved? And who is in the original group for the research? Do you include community representatives on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a radical move we're making in that the research questions will be completely derived from community. The funding for the research is put over with the community groups to fund their research. So they will actually hire the researchers essentially, or they're involved in the granting process. So the idea is that we're shifting the kind of power equation over to the community groups, essentially. So this is a particular definition of community groups because they're all health charities, essentially, and their constituents. So it's very experimental, and we're learning from what's been done with the British Science Association in the UK, and they've experimented with this as well. So we're trying to build an evidence base around community-led research. So there's a very different kind of way of doing research and a very different kind of ethic than we currently do. So we do, engaged research, but this is a very radical form of engaged research.
So, sorry, just a follow-on question. The initial, the community groups that you'll be working are charities. So is there anybody with lived experience on those?
Yeah, exactly. So it's their members, so we're reaching out to the charities and their constituents, the people that they're serving, and deriving research questions from them. Yeah, so that's it. So it's very much ground up and community up, grassroots up.
Okay, I see a couple more questions here. Emma, do you want to have a go? And then there's a gentleman behind you. I'm not sure if we can get a mic to you. You can shout.
Hi Martin, Emma Norris, the Engaged Research Manager at ECD.
Yep.
It's a really great, initiative to have. I was just wondering, we've done aspects like this probably on a smaller scale of what you're doing, and one of the big issues we found was that the charities had issues with their capacity when we gave them the budget to actually run it. Yep. We actually ended up with quite a lot more issues for the charity than original. So do you have built into the project ways to help the charities with managing that and managing the actual running of a research project when they're not set up to do so? Yeah,
exactly. So we've a dedicated person within the initiative that's going to focus on that and that kind of brokering role between the charities and their members and the researchers as well. So, but very much in kind of developing their capacity. And also we haven't pulled this out of thin air purposely because there's ethics around doing these things that are too experimental, but we're learning from what the British Science Association have done. And we're spending a couple of days with them in June to really kind of go through their processes and what they've done and all of their learning. And that's one of the big issues, is around kind of building the capacity of community groups to participate in this kind of approach. So look, there's going to be mistakes made, there's going to be learning here, but these things are really important, and if we are to kind of do research in a way that's inclusive, ethical, engaged, these kind of schemes are really, really needed. And there's been a lack of funding in Ireland, despite the commitment to things like engaged research, to actually help with capacity building around these kinds. So we're really grateful for Wellcome for taking the chance here with us to do this,
We have one more question.
Hi, Steve Meany from QUB.
Hey, Steve.
Martin, I was just wondering, you mentioned wraparound supports a couple of times. I'm probably loud enough without that, am I? And I just wondered, what does that mean in practice from an implementation point of view? It kind of builds on the last question a little bit, but can you just kind of maybe describe what the vision is for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a team of 3 people who are going to be hired to run the scheme, work with the researchers, work with the community. So, and essentially that wraparound scheme will be co-designed as well. So initially we're really kind of looking at kind of the needs of some of our early career researchers in this area, and we're kind of learning from that. So we've kind of spotted kind of various supports that they need. It also, on the other side as well, on the community, has a question there around capacity building. Is to ensure that we're really hearing the voice of community, understanding the need there in terms of participation in these kind of schemes. So the idea is that we've got strong support around all of the issues that come up, that we're listening very, very carefully, responding appropriately, and providing the kind of support that's needed. So like if you think of it another way, oftentimes early career researchers, especially who come out to work with community groups, they can be relatively unsupported. And it's a real issue. Ethical things can come up. There can be just very simple difficulties around how you do things. And so there's a long kind of learning curve. And we're trying to kind of accelerate learning through a wraparound scheme. So the idea there is that the kind of living lab essentially is kind of that wraparound scheme, that there are people available to support, that learning can be shared quickly, and just the kind of process for early career researchers around how they do community research and community-led research is just accelerated. You know, look, I know when I started out, it took me a long time as a researcher to really get to grips with how to work with community well and effectively. But that can be accelerated. You know, we can share that learning more effectively. So that's the idea behind the wraparound idea.
All right, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to welcome Chris Browne, who is the head of Research Strategy and Engagement at Queen's University Belfast. He led the Wellcome application and also leads institutional approaches to research culture, as well as the Research Culture Action Plan. He's going to tell us about their project. Chris.
Thanks, Colleen. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about our project, which, as you can see, is the Northern Ireland Research Culture Network, formerly known as Northern Ireland Research Culture Initiative. So we have another network for research culture, but I think this is a really important one. And as you can see, it's a partnership between Queen's and Ulster University, who were a co-applicant on the grant, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. I guess what makes ours slightly different from the other two projects you're going to hear about is that obviously, in addition to be part of the all-island sort of research ecosystem, we are based within the UK, and we are, you know, firmly part of the sort of UK research culture policy environment, and that is a sort of major topic that's been evolving quite a lot over the last 4 to 5 years in particular. And is continuing to evolve. So Roz obviously talked about the Royal Society definition and this really important and influential report that Wellcome published in 2020, which I think instigated a lot of activity in the sector around research culture. And I guess off the back of that, we have seen a number of government and funder strategies looking at issues of research culture. So these are a selection of them. We're still at a point where that is evolving. A really useful and interesting report, I thought, was this publication commissioned by UK Research and Innovation, our main sort of research funder in the UK, which tried to sort of synthesise all the things that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years or so in this research culture space to try and identify examples of best practice. And one of the things, interestingly, that it did was tried to come up with a framework to sort of define research culture and all the things that it includes. As Ross said earlier, it's very difficult to do that. It encompasses everything we do, but for reasons that will become apparent, this report has tried to put some sort of a structure around that. We're now in the UK at a really interesting point because we're just about to see the inclusion of research culture as part of our national research assessment exercise, the Research Excellence Framework. So this will see universities assessed on their progress against research culture, and that has a link to funding. So there are mixed views on whether that's a good or a bad thing. I think there are pros and cons. It's certainly somewhere in the middle. But most importantly, I think it's a really significant moment for the sector because we are going to have a sort of clearer framework for how we actually measure and assess progress against some of the priorities in research culture. And interestingly, the group that produced that report that I mentioned a moment ago have been commissioned by REF to run an engagement process over the coming months to try and put some sort of a framework around this. How do you really measure research culture, particularly in a whole range of different contexts and different types of institutions? So that's the kind of environment that we're operating within and what we were thinking about when we tried to come up with our idea for our Wellcome application. On the back of all of these initiatives, for all these reasons and many more, loads of universities now have research culture strategies and action plans across the UK, as many of us do across the island of Ireland. Queen's and Ulster are no different. Ulster's new research strategy has a major focus on research culture and community. We at Queen's have a research culture action plan, which we're currently in the process of revising. So we're all saying the right things about research culture. As Roz again mentioned earlier, that's the easy part. It's the doing it, it's delivering against what you set out, which is the challenge. And one of the issues, I guess, for us in Northern Ireland, and we're not alone in this, is that the resources are limited, and there is a little bit of a sort of mixed picture in terms of the funding available for research culture in the UK. So institutions in England receive a block grant for research culture initiatives. The institutions in England, universities in England, obviously making up the bulk of the UK sector. We're moving towards a point where we're all going to be assessed on how we deliver against these sort of research culture priorities. And one of the points that we had thought about a lot was, well, how do we do that in a Northern Ireland context? There's some sort of structural imbalance in the system here that a lot of institutions in England are receiving funding to deliver against these things, and we are not. And of course, our colleagues in Scotland and Wales are in a similar position, but in Northern Ireland we do suffer from a particular funding gap relative to the rest of the UK, which limits resources to do these things. So along came the Wellcome opportunity, which was, we immediately jumped at the chance to do that. We recognised, okay, here's a really rare opportunity for us to get some funding to do something at a Northern Ireland level and think about research culture. So as we initially conceived the bid, we had a bit of a think about, well, what does the research culture in Northern Ireland look like? What do we want to change about it? And we noted that there was a range of things about our research culture that actually present opportunities that put us in a really strong position to do something quite positive. But there are obviously a range of challenges as well, a number of things that we would want to address. And a really important point to make before I go through these is that, and this comes back to one of the points made earlier, is that when we were defining research culture and we were defining the broader research in the research environment in Northern Ireland, we weren't just thinking about the two universities. We weren't just thinking about higher education. We were obviously thinking about further education as well. But I think more importantly, we're thinking about all the different actors within our research environment. So that includes funders, that includes those working in other research performing organisations, and those in industry and third sector and more. So when we think about the opportunities and challenges for research culture in Northern Ireland, it's not just about the universities, it's about that wider context. In terms of the opportunities, there is an increasing and growing recognition, it should be common sense that research and innovation is absolutely critical to economic recovery, growth and productivity. In Northern Ireland, it's something that's been recognised everywhere, but with the return of the executive and so on, and something that we were at the point of putting this application together still in the dark about, we knew that this is key to it, and we are in a strong position to say, well, a thriving and positive and inclusive research culture can only be a good thing, and we can link that to economic outcomes. We're a small region, we're a compact region. For the universities in particular and for other actors within the research environment, we have close proximity to the key decision makers, certainly those in government, our regional funder, users of research, such as those in industry, and obviously each other. There are two universities which undertake a lot of research activity. It's not a big, complex sector. We kind of know who everybody is. We're operating in the UK system, but the all-island context presents us with loads of opportunities. We're the only part of the UK that shares a border with an EU member state. And the two universities and broader parts of the system in Northern Ireland have a really strong track record for world-leading research and innovation outcomes. So those were all things that said, yeah, we're in a decent position, but there are challenges, and these are the things that we wanted to address through our project. So we do have a less well-developed research ecosystem than other parts of the UK for various reasons. The two main ones really relate to funding. Low levels of public funding for research and low levels of sort of private sector R&D activity. Those are two things that we wanted to think about within the context of the project. Most importantly, we understood that, yes, we have a less well-developed research ecosystem, but we also have limited information about what the research ecosystem in Northern Ireland actually looks like. What does our current research culture actually look like? Who is operating within it? We know what happens in the universities, but all those other people that are part of our research environment in Northern Ireland, we had limited information about who they are and what they think about the culture that they operate within. Despite the compact nature of our region, we recognise that we're probably not as well connected as we should be, certainly within the higher education sector. We felt there was more we could do to collaborate, certainly between Queen's and Ulster University, thinking about issues of research culture, but also between different sectors. So I've mentioned the industry element and so on, something that we wanted to address through this. Where there are other parts of our economy that are research active, how do we help bridge the connections between the universities and them, And we also recognise that there are particular groups within our small research ecosystem in Northern Ireland that share common challenges, common issues, you know, and share a common culture, but actually aren't as well integrated. So one of those groups would be people like myself who work within research management and administration. Why are we not talking to each other more often? Something that we certainly should be doing. The geographical context, again, brings opportunities, but it also brings an added degree of complexity at times. And two key things that we wanted to address were, we know that we have excellent research talent within the system. We know that there is a demand for their skills beyond higher education, beyond the research sector, but there is a perception that there are limited opportunities to develop and to progress talent, and perception or feeling that there is low awareness of the full diversity of career paths that exist. That's something that's understandable within a small sector. If you want to stay in Northern Ireland and there's 2 universities, you know, it obviously follows that there are less opportunities to move around, so we see less mobility within the sector. So those were the issues that we were thinking about as we put our proposal together. The key thing was, look, all of these challenges are shared, and none of them can be solved by any one party operating in isolation. We are a small region with limited funding, and we need to do more with less. There is no point in Queen's running off and doing something, Ulster going and doing something, our regional funder, the Department for the Economy, doing something different. It is critical that we all work together, and we felt that this was a real opportunity to do that. Queen's was one of the institutions invited to apply, so Queen's was the lead applicant on the proposal, but from day one we brought Ulster University into that conversation and asked them to be involved as a co-applicant on the bid. And we recognised the all-island dimension as well, building on conversations that we were having with UCD in particular. I'll not dwell on that bit because you're going to hear more about that shortly. We worked collaboratively with Ulster to identify the issues that I've just talked about and to develop a plan and to think about how could we come up with something to try and address those things, and most importantly built upon the existing research culture work going on at both universities. In particular, you know, 2 areas. One is the development of early career research talent, where Queen's has been doing quite a lot over the last number of years for our postdoctoral development centre, but also at Ulster with work that they had around practice-based research. We felt, right, those are 2 areas that we already have some sort of fertile ground to build upon. We had to prioritise activities, so there was no way that we could address all of those challenges in a short 2-year window with a limited envelope for funding. So what we wanted to do was prioritise the areas that were likely to have the biggest impact in the 2-year window available, but also think quite carefully about how then that had potential for further work in the future. So once we had our outline plan agreed, we harnessed the opportunity presented by the Wellcome funding to do 2 key things. One was to secure a commitment from our institutions to say, if we are successful, will you give us some additional funding to keep the project going for 2 more years? We realised there's only so much you can do in 2 years. If we can extend that out to 4 years, the potential will be much greater. And then, most importantly, got support and commitment from a lot of those other key stakeholders within the research environment in Northern Ireland to not just give us a letter of support for the proposal, but to commit to being part of the project when the time came. And critically, that included our regional funder, the Department for the Economy, who were very happy to support us, the other research institutes in Northern Ireland, such as the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, and key operators in the industry environment, so companies like Almac that are R&D active. The project was successfully funded for 2 years, so it's $650,000 over 2 years, and on the back of that we have 2 additional years commitment from both universities to essentially sustain and keep the key project team in place so that we can really build upon what we deliver through the project. What does the project actually entail then? So essentially we are establishing a regional network for research culture. And it's not just research culture in, as I say, the higher education sense that we know about. It is that much more sort of broader ecosystem that we're looking at. All those parties that give us their support and their commitment will be part of 2 key elements of the network. One is the steering board, where we'll have senior colleagues from the universities and from from the Department for the Economy who will oversee and provide strategic direction for the programme. But then a much larger advisory group, but we want to ensure that all the key voices within the research environment in Northern Ireland are heard and that they are able to inform and direct the project as we move forward. There's 4 key work streams we'll talk about in a moment, and I'll not dwell on the all-island network, as I said, because we're going to come back to that. But critically, we will have an independent evaluation element of the programme as well. As Martin had mentioned, this will be absolutely critical. So what are we actually going to do? There's 4 key work streams, as I say. The first is a project where we will put out a tender for an independent party to conduct some research on the research culture in Northern Ireland. And this sounds quite fundamental, but I think will be really transformational for us. So we want them to go out to conduct surveys, interviews, do some desk-based research, and really undertake a landscape review of what the current research community in Northern Ireland looks like, who is in it, and what are their experiences, and really focusing on the regional dynamics. We know what we know about the wider UK context, and there's been loads of work done on that. What we need to do now is really focus in on our regional context. On the back of that, we will publish a report from that piece of research, conducted an awareness-raising campaign, hold a couple of events to share the findings. But then on the back of that, the steering board and the advisory group will work to develop a regional research culture action plan for Northern Ireland, and a lot of that work will go into the 2 years post-project. The second work stream is around enabling research and career development and exploring alternative pathways. So I talked about the perception that there are limited opportunities to progress, and that we need to do more to bridge the connection between the research community and other sectors. So we'll appoint a new research careers and employability officer who critically, yes, will be based at Queen's, but will be working between the 2 universities. And what they will work to do is to establish a careers and employability support programme for researchers at both universities and deliver a number of initiatives, critically including a series of thematic workshops where we will bring together researchers and those within key employers within our regional economy, and to try and bridge that gap, to dispel the myths and to improve the awareness and understanding of the talent that is available, but also the opportunities that exist. Then I talked about our connectivity within our research culture. We're a small region, but we aren't as well connected as we should be. So we thought about 2 particular groups that could work together more. One, as I referred to earlier, is research professionals, managers and administrators. So we have established a Northern Ireland Research Professionals Network. Critically, that is bringing together people in research support roles, not just at the universities, but also in all these other organisations, to get together and to think about all the shared challenges we have. And really, practically and operationally, there's dozens of those. We could have an event every month if we wanted to, but what we're going to do is have a couple of events per year, not just to address key issues, but also to sort of build those connections going forward. And the outcome here is that we want people at Queen's, at Ulster, at AFBI to be able to pick up the phone to their peers and colleagues in our relatively small region to clearly understand who is doing a similar job to you a few miles down the road, and to share knowledge and best practice. And finally, a project really led by colleagues at Ulster University is enabling excellence in practice as research in Northern Ireland. So recognising the importance of practice-based research, in particular the creative industries, to the Northern Ireland economy. There's recognition at Ulster through their new research strategy and the research culture elements of that there are individuals in practice-based research roles who don't feel part of the traditional academic community, who feel they have a slightly different context and characteristics. And what we want to do is do something very similar to the research managers, is to bring them together for a series of workshops, but also to build a more integrated network for that cohort going forward. Progress so far. So the project began on the 1st of April. We have focused thus far on recruiting to these key posts, which will form our project team. So we have a research culture manager at both Queen's and Ulster. Our colleague Elise is here today, who's our research culture manager, and we've managed to make appointments to most of these roles, and hoping that all these people will take up their posts over the summer and hit the ground running. We're shortly going to publish the tenders for the research project, but also our independent evaluation element. We've established the Northern Ireland Professionals Network, so we hit the ground running before even the project had started on that. We now have around 130 members from across the research community in Northern Ireland. Hoping to have a further event very soon with that group. And as I say, one of the roles we have appointed is the Research Careers and Employability Officer, so they're going to take up their post very shortly and get things moving, and we'll get the steering board together in the next couple of months. So just a few final points as to why I think the opportunity presented by the Wellcome funding and the opportunities presented by this project itself are so important. This has enabled activities that I don't think would have occurred otherwise. I don't think we would have embarked on a joint approach to research culture with Ulster University if it wasn't for this funding stream, partly down to the lack of resources, but also because it probably wouldn't have been a priority in the bigger scheme for all the different stakeholders in the research community in Northern Ireland. It is a prime example of the potential for partnership in the region, particularly in a small region, and hopefully if this is successful, others will do the same. There's an increasingly partnership-based approach to research and innovation in Northern Ireland, but hopefully this can be part of demonstrating the importance of that going forward. While we have this project, and we will focus on all the activities within that, what it has enabled us to do is to create a team focused on research culture, which we didn't otherwise have at the two institutions. So we're really hopeful that not only will we deliver what we want for the project in the 2 years after, but longer term we will have, which we might not have had otherwise, embedded research culture teams within the two institutions, created a pathway to develop this regional culture action plan and an all-island approach to research culture. So I think that, as I say, the most important point here is that without the support from Wellcome, we probably wouldn't have been able to do these things. There's still a long road ahead in terms of actually delivering against a lot of this and ensuring that we sustain the network and get all the key people around the table. But yeah, we're very excited about it. So thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Interested in kind of the government piece as well, and the fact that you have that partnership, which is quite interesting. And I'm just wondering, like, what the mood music from the government side is around these kind of things. Do they understand the importance of it, and particularly because you talked about the connection with the wider social and economic system in the north and its development, which is really, really important for the whole island. So I think that's a really interesting piece where you've connected research culture to government involvement in that wider concept of economic and social development.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think so. That's a really, a really positive sort of partnership going forward. So we don't have a traditional higher education funder in Northern Ireland. We have a government department which has, as part of its many responsibilities, higher education under that, and it's a relatively small group compared to the Scottish Funding Council or Research England, or even your funding bodies down here. So it's more important, in Northern Ireland compared to other parts of the UK and Ireland, that we work really closely with them. They're probably learning about things at the same rate that we are. They're not, they are well connected to all the different groups that they need to be, but probably don't have the scale and capacity to really think about the detail of research and science policy as much as others might be able to. So actually all of us working together, I think, benefits them as much as it does us. And in terms of the economic sort of piece, there's definitely a growing recognition within there around the importance of a thriving research culture for economic recovery and growth in Northern Ireland, and most importantly, down to people and talent. And that's the argument that I find has been a winner, is to say, a positive research culture, an inclusive research culture, is more likely to attract people to a region. We do struggle to recruit talent from around the world to Northern Ireland. And I think that developing our research culture is one way of doing that.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry, but we have limited time, and Chris will be in the EDI session later. You can catch him at lunch. So let's thank him very much. I have the pleasure now of inviting Grace Mulcahy up to talk about the UCD project. Grace is a full professor of veterinary medicine. She is also the university's research integrity officer and has been the chair of our research culture initiative. Grace.
Thank you, Colleen. Me again. Sorry about that. And I know lunchtime is approaching. Your tummies are probably telling you that, and Colleen is a very strict chair. So I'm going to be brief. And the only thing between now and lunch is this brief presentation, and then very importantly, Colleen is going to tell you a little bit about the All-Ireland Research Culture Network and how we hope that it will work. So, by way of background then, we have an ongoing portfolio of activities in research culture at UCD, which was very, I think, enthusiastically and positively supported by our now President, Orla Feely, when she was in the Vice President for Research Impact and Innovation role. And I'm delighted to see our new VPRI, Kate Robson-Brown, here today, which I think will be expressive or indicative of the continued support, I think, for research culture activities in UCD. And this diagram was one which we used when we were going to Orla originally and saying, well, it would be really good to do something about research culture and to see where we are in UCD in terms of our research culture. So we used this little diagram here, which is meant to express the different drivers of research culture, both at the individual level, so peers interact with each other as researchers, that sometimes engenders a competitive and indeed sometimes a hyper-competitive environment. Supervisors and mentors obviously have a huge influence on their trainees in research. And then we have the funders and the organisations, so we're also drivers of culture within the research ecosystem. And when I saw Rosa's diagram earlier about the different parts of the research ecosystem influencing culture, I thought, oh, that's kind of a convergent evolution there. We've both thought about this thing in a really interesting way. So that was our starting point. When we started out on this work, what we did was a baseline survey of our community in 2021. And we found, by going back to the community, which we define broadly as those who conduct research and those who support them in doing research in various ways, that people really want us and wanted us as a research community in the university to value research quality over research quantity, and they felt we could improve in doing that. They also wanted us to recognise all of those who contribute to research outputs. They wanted us to recognise, yes, the principal investigators, yes, the PhD students and the postdocs, but also the research managers and administrators, and those specialists such as the technical officers who keep our major scientific equipment going. And all of those they felt needed to be present at the table and have a chance to be in the spotlight, not just holding up the pillars below decks, if you like. And they also expressed a wish that as researchers they could be supported throughout the research life cycle. And indeed we knew already, and it was clearly echoed in our survey, that some parts of our research life cycle were well supported and some less so. So what we did then was we produced a research culture roadmap with a number of recommendations in it, which I won't go into, but basically these were under 5 categories. We felt that the concept and rules around and norms around authorship needed to be better communicated and supported in our community. We felt that there was work to do on responsible use of research metrics, and this chimes, I think, very much with the session on research assessment that we'll have this afternoon. And, our university has a policy on RURM, but we felt that we could do more in ensuring that policy was implemented throughout all of our processes, from recruitment right through to research funding and research outputs. We felt there was a lot we could do to support our researchers and their well-being and their career advancement and development. And we felt that we needed to have a look at our reward and recognition policies, particularly in respect of those parts of the communities which are sometimes out of the spotlight and were doing a lot of the work but didn't get a lot of the the claps on the back when things went well. And then also, I think in any research culture work, people are interested in looking at the concepts of collegiality and collaboration and how they interface with the necessary competitive nature of research and of doing research. And we also wanted at that stage to have our research culture activities and team permanently embedded within our organisational structure, because we were just funded on a kind of an impermanent project basis at that point. And I'm really glad to see that that recommendation has been taken on board, and we're now on a solid footing. So then comes along Wellcome and its institutional fund for research culture. And I do think that we had a little bit of a rubbing of the hands moment and said, well, this is great. This is coming at a really good time for us. And so we developed a project which would, I think, stand above, and which does stand above and is additional to our ongoing roadwork of work that we're doing in the research culture space. We called our project RENEEW, which stands for Research Culture, Networking, Empowerment, Engagement and Wellbeing. And this diagram here is the one we used in our application to try and summarise what we hope to do during the 2 years of funding. So standing at the bottom here is our own research culture team. And the next layer are people that we wanted to have as additional supports, additional resources, human resources into the project. And then we have what we hope to do with those. And finally, the network coordinator, which Colleen will speak about when she talks about the launch of our network here today. So the 3 pillars of our RENEEW project are, first of all, empowerment, secondly, engagement, and thirdly, well-being. So under empowerment, one of the things we found out in our survey work was that people were very happy that we were doing research culture work across the organisation, across the institution. But they sometimes said to us, that's lovely, that's fine, but in my little part or corner of the university, sometimes that light doesn't permeate down very far. I would like to be able to do something from the bottom up that would really improve the research culture in my neck of the woods. So what we did, and in fact we've just finished evaluating, is said we would do some seed funding for people who wanted to do something local within the university to improve research culture. And we also said we would provide some workshop-based training around research culture themes for those of the researchers and others in our institution who are interested. And to achieve that, we're in the process of employing a trainer and seed funding coordinator, and that's hopefully we will know we'll have a confirmation of the person to fill that position very soon. Secondly, then, the engagement pillar, and this pillar is very much, I think, in sync with our HR team, and in particular Rory and Mark, who are sitting at the back here, who have a brief over overall research culture, organisational culture and development and people development within the organisation. And under the engagement platform then we put activities on reward and recognition, for example, for technical officers, research managers and so on. We said we would do something to look at those who were in research but had maybe curvy or atypical research paths and didn't come up in a straight line, if you like. And we wanted to focus on interdisciplinary research, and I would also add in transdisciplinary research in there. So we hope to have some nice interdisciplinary seminars for early career researchers to help that along. And we will again, and again we'll announce this very soon, the person to fulfil the post of research culture engagement specialist, who will work closely with Colleen and colleagues in HR as well. And the final pillar of the project is on well-being. And so in our first research culture survey, we found out a lot of things that researchers were saying and what they felt, because they had the opportunity for free text comments as well as answering forum questions in the survey. And as part of our research culture team, we had Sonia Deshane, and I think Sonia is here today. And she made a very effective and a very strong argument for including a section in the next iteration of our research culture survey, which actually was carried out late in 2023, on researcher well-being and researcher mental health, and in particular how researcher well-being impacted with aspects of research culture, good and bad. So at another stage, I think Sonia will tell you more about that, and we're very excited to have that, and already some really interesting results are coming out from it. And with the Wellcome funding, we've been able to employ a postdoctoral research associate, Hugh Fulham-Quillen, who may well be here today as well, and provide some teaching buyout for Sonia to work with Hugh on that element. And we really look forward to telling you more about that in our network meetings as we go through. So our team is one which we say has hybrid vigour in terms of research culture. So we have a number of academics in there, we have a number of managers and administrators, and we have HR professionals, and there are people who cross, I guess, all three strands. Most importantly, the principal applicant of our project, as required by the Wellcome terms and conditions, is our president, Orla Feely, and I think that's only fitting given the fact that she was a very strong and very powerful advocate for our wish to do research culture work right at the beginning, and continues to be so. And these are the other cast of characters here in our research culture team, soon to be augmented by the people we're able to employ. Thank you to Wellcome for the funding. So what have we done to date? Well, we have just evaluated round one of our seed funding research culture fund, which we called RECLAIM. And RECLAIM standard for UCD Research Culture, Local Actions, Initiatives and Measures. And what we're doing is providing up to €10,000 per project for people, groups who want to come together and put a proposal together for something that will improve research culture in their particular context, but will also be scalable and have the potential for impact more broadly within the university and indeed outside it through our networking abilities. We had a fantastic response to that. We had over 50 proposals submitted, and will be announcing the results of that competition in the next couple of weeks, and I think they will be genuinely impactful projects, very diverse projects across the institution, so we're really delighted to have been able to do that. The other things that we're doing, I mentioned the researcher well-being element of our survey, so Hugh and Sonia are analysing that. I think that will be really powerful data because the team are excellent social scientists with the skills that can do really nice, sophisticated, important analysis of how research culture impacts on researcher well-being. And then today, we're launching our research culture network across the island. So that's something that we really want to celebrate, and we think we're at the beginning of a really important series of conversations in that. So on that point, I'm going to stop, and rather than invite questions, I'll hand you over straight to Colleen, so our lunch won't be delayed, but we will be able to have our lunch. Thank you very much.